Did you know we have a thriving global community of like-minded ancestral home cooks and homesteaders? Every day on our Discord forum, we are discussing what we're cooking, what we're growing, what we're thinking about, what our latest struggles are, and supporting each other to fully embrace this beautiful lifestyle. As a patron member, you can also choose to access an extra private podcast feed, which includes monthly intimate chats where Andrea and I talk in depth about what's happening in our lives and kitchens. There are over 90 recordings waiting for you there right now. In addition, we've got a massive collection of inspiring and helpful downloads for you, including many recipes and videos. And once a month, you'll get to visit with myself, Andrea, and the community as we come together live and in person. Visit ancestralkitchenpodcast.com for all the details on how to join us. Come be part of our world and change yours.
You all have been such great podcast supporters, and you're such great customers of our sponsor, OneEarthHealth.com, and they are running a giveaway for our U.S. listeners. It runs from April 1st to May 13th, and you'll win a 3-month, that's 3 bottles, supply of liver capsules. To enter, you'll sign up to our mailing list at ancestralkitchenpodcast.com and sign up for the One Earth Health mailing list at oneearthhealth.com. All of these links are in the show notes. It's almost May, the month which the early medieval Anglo-Saxons called thrymilce, because according to the Venerable St Bede, in that month cattle were milked 3 times a day. I don't know if you're milking your cow 3 times a day, but 'tis the season for lots of fresh and available milk. What to do with all that milk, and if you don't have a cow, what to do if you have access to raw milk and want to make staple value-added dairy products in your home, like cottage cheese, sour cream, and yogurt. The dairy products in this episode are all delicious, high value, low failure risk, and don't require expensive equipment, multiple gallons of milk, or a cheese cave. In fact, you can even make all of these recipes, or almost all of them, with a low-heat pasteurized milk, as well as with a raw milk. I've linked every episode we talk about in the show notes. And as an extra thank you for keeping us on the air, I have created a PDF in the download section for podcast supporters at the $12 and above levels, with all these links and some additional recipes as well. Take a seat on the milking stool, get a glass of fresh, warm milka, and let's talk home dairy. Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen Podcast.
I'm Alison, a European town dweller living in England.
And I'm Andrea, living on a family farm in Northwest Washington State, USA.
Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Hello, Alison. How are you?
Hi, Andrea. I'm good. Yeah. Excited to record again. It feels like we haven't recorded for ages. I miss it.
Yeah. When did we? I mean, we'll have like a meeting or something, and then so that's a bye week, I guess. So then, it does make it feel. Well, we get really used to talking to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
But as much as we've already talked this morning, I don't actually know what your lunch was. So this will be a surprise for me. So what did you last eat?
Yeah. We had a really nice lunch. Really nice. I had some pig liver pate, which I'd made a couple of weeks ago in the freezer. Got that out yesterday. Let it defrost.
Nice.
And then some rye sourdough bread, which we fried in suet. We got a massive lot of suet from Albert, the guy who we get our meat from at the market, a couple of weeks ago. And I actually rendered it rather than just crumbling it into, puddings. I thought, no, I'm going to render this. So we rendered it. It produced the most amazing tallow, just really hard, really kind of flaky, rather than lard. It kind of flakes off. And also just not tasting or smelling of cow at all. Really kind of pure. Even though I didn't wet render it, I rendered it wet render, that's quite hard to say. I rendered it without any water, but it came out just really not tasting like cow at all. And so because we've got so much in our freezer, I'm trying to make room in the freezer because this week I'm getting a beef heart and I'm getting some bones and I'm getting some more suet. So I'm trying to make room in the freezer to kind of get everything out and eat it this week. So I thought, we better start using that suet a bit more. So because it's hard and you can't spread it, I've taken to just frying our bread in it. Oh, it's really delicious. It goes all crunchy.
That sounds so good.
Yummy. So I
And
spread
it's
yeah. Go on.
The suet specifically is not just tallow, so it's the suet.
No, it's the suet. Okay. I don't know what you call rendered suet. Just call it suet. I don't know.
I
Has
guess.
It got a special name?
I don't
rendered
know.
suet rather than non-rendered suet. It was the suet, definitely. I think that's why it is less kind of cow smell, because it's the suet, which is considered a kind of a finer version of the fat. So I spread my liver pate on my fried suet rye sourdough, and then the salads are coming back slowly at the market. We have a lady called Roz who gives us veg, and she does kind of salad greens. So I had some greens, grated carrot, and Gabriel made a dressing yesterday with lots of different things in. So we had that over it. And then at the end of the meal, I had half an orange. Gosh. Incredible treat.
Wow. That's a big leap from where you were when I first met you, and you couldn't have...
absolutely. And it's so exciting in two different ways, because firstly, the apples are run out of the market. They kept going and going and going, and then the last week came and I'm like, we've used all our apples up. We won't have anything now until the plums in June. So one of the UK supporters of the podcast had told me about a company called Crowd Farming, and we actually talked about them in our Getting Out of Supermarkets guide.
Right.
And I thought, you know what, I'm going to get some olive oil, not from a supermarket. I'm fed up with these horrible olive oils, and I'm fed up with going into a supermarket to buy them since we moved here. We were so spoiled in Italy, we could just get local, amazing olive oil. And so I decided to have a look at their olive oil supplies. Crowd Farming sell directly from regenerative farmers or farmers who are trying to go regenerative, in the process of going regenerative, to direct to consumer all over Europe. And they transport never by air, and they try to kind of put things together so the transport is as minimal as possible. And they put money into kind of regenerating the soil. They're just supporting regenerative farmers throughout Europe. So we bought some olive oil from them, and in doing that, we added on a box of oranges as a treat, I guess, for us until we have some fruit back again. And the boys have been eating them, and I've been thinking, there's going to be no oranges left by the time I get around to having one. And so today I thought, you know what, I'm still a bit hungry after lunch. Going to have half an orange. And as you talked about just a few moments ago, people who listen to the podcast will know I don't really eat sweet things. And so I'm slowly reintroducing sweet things into my life and seeing how I'm getting on with them. So half an orange was an incredible treat, and it was so delicious and so thirst quenching and just beautiful. Really, really lovely.
What a pleasure.
It was. How about you? What have you eaten? Have you eaten today?
Well, I haven't eaten breakfast, but actually, to that point, I was realizing I should tell you what I did have, because it's a kind of a nice thing if you aren't able to eat breakfast right away, which in my case was only for the sake of time.
Yeah.
Was the raw milk warmer in Nourishing Traditions. So I now know, Allison, from the read-along, that there's an older, like the first edition of the Nourishing Traditions. Oh. And it's slightly different, and it doesn't have all the recipes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So if somebody's looking for something, I didn't know that until now, or, a couple weeks ago. So if somebody's looking through when we're talking about a recipe and they're like, what are you talking about? Check the copyright date and see if you have the first or second edition. But I don't think the raw milk warmer is in the first edition, which is why I was saying that. But it's a really nice drink. Sally Fallon uses carob. I've done it with either carob or cocoa. But the what I do when I make it is I make twice as much, and then I put half of it in a bottle in the fridge, so that then the next day, or the next time, in this case this morning, I wanted very quickly something that I could have. I heated that on the stove and then had this warm drink. It has the raw milk. This one has cocoa powder in it. There's maple syrup, nutritional yeast. So there's some fat, some carbs, some, a little bit of protein to sort of keep my system going until we finish.
I think it's absolutely fine to have cocoa. We've had Marcus Patchett on the podcast, who's a cocoa guru. If you look back in the annals of our wonderful episodes.
That is an early episode.
And we will hopefully have him on later in the year. And there are incredible benefits to chocolate, which we.
But what would he say to me putting it with the milk? I don't know.
Yeah, he probably won't like that.
Of that. Yeah.
Listeners will have to listen to the episode later in the year to find out why.
I'll be so convicted. I'll go back to just the carob version.
The other thing I wanted to say that I forgot a minute ago was I have a voucher for crowd farming. And if anyone uses it, they get €10 off their next order. So if anyone's listening in Europe and wants to investigate crowd farming, I will put a link in the show notes to the voucher thing that I have, because, it's a benefit.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, well, this is going to be a really great episode, Alison, but let's get through a little bit of housekeeping on our way to the episode. So this month that this episode is going out is April. Wait, did I get that right? Is it going out in April?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. You did. As soon as I said it, I panicked. So it's going out in April, and there are 5 Tuesdays in April, and we have an episode that comes out on the first Tuesday and the third Tuesday of every month. So when there's a 5th Tuesday, we actually don't have an episode drop that day. So you'll have 2-week wait. But if you just cannot get through another week without Alison and myself in your ear, we do have a bonus podcast called Kitchen Table Chats, where Alison, you and I have created, and then we have had lots of our guests have helped us create tons of content on there. But we have a bonus episode going out on the 5th Tuesday of April. A full episode is going out on that podcast where I talked with Leah, a friend of mine who was visiting from Alaska, and she wanted to understand how I use the Plan to Eat app and how I schedule my meals. And the way that I schedule our meals right now, actually, you could do it without the app too if you wanted. So we went over meal planning together, and it was kind of a miracle because between the two of us, we have 7 children, and some of them are quite small, and there was naps to negotiate around for, I think, 3 of the kids, and we somehow managed to line everything up the last day that she was here visiting so that we had a free hour. I know. They all kind of come in towards the end, so you'll hear them come in and start saying, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" So they come in at the end of the episode, but other than that, we are mostly uninterrupted, and for her 10-day visit, that was the only hour that we're without the children on.
So are you saying that's going up on the private podcast?
Yes, that will go up on the
Tuesday.
KTC. Yep. So there'll be a little bonus. So if you want access to that, and I think there's over 100 other episodes on there, Alison, well over 100 now, then you can go to the show notes and just click our podcast website, ancestralkitchenpodcast.com, and join as a supporter at the $12 and above level, and you will get that. And a lot of those extra episodes also have downloads and PDFs and things, that ebooks and stuff that go along with them. So you'll just get all of that.
Yeah.
Okay. And speaking of, Alison, can you tell me, where is our production team on the process of building us our own processing platform?
Typing away manically. Our production team, in other words, Rob and me, we're in the process of taking the management of our community off of Patreon. We've talked about this before, so if you've listened to any of the episodes in the last few months, you might have heard us mention it. We're doing that. We were kind of pushed to make that decision because of Apple increasing charges using their app store. So you as an end user will get charged 30% more than we are setting, and that money would go straight into the pocket of Apple, which we don't like. So we are taking the management of our community back to us, to ourselves, and kind of losing Patreon. The first stage of that is almost complete. So we're keeping our Discord server because we absolutely love it.
Because if you take it away, I will have a tantrum.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. What would you do?
It's so awesome. I don't know.
It's user-friendly, really a wonderful place to interact. No ads, no feed, no anyone else other than the people who have elected to come and be part of our community. So supportive. So we want to keep that, but we're going to manage that Discord server ourselves. And that's the first stage, which we've almost done. After that is in the bag, shall we say, we'll be setting up our own systems so that everything will go through ancestralkitchenpodcast.com. So if at the moment you want to join and you're on Apple, don't use the App Store. If you go to your computer and use a browser instead, you will be able to join without that 30%. In the future, that won't be an issue because once we've swapped it to us managing the whole thing, then there won't be any extra money going anywhere else other than towards keeping us going with this podcast. So that's...
Which we thank you for. You guys, seriously, there's no way we could do this without you guys. Like, this is so wonderful having all of everybody's help getting this show on the air. And it feels, Allison, a little bit like our process that we did with food, where, we started the podcast and we were using this, bigger systems, and they supported us and helped us get on our way, like Patreon, etc. And now we kind of want to do it ourselves. And I remember Rob did talk about that from the very beginning, but it would have been more challenging to do then because we had no resources, and now we have everybody helping us. They're literally helping him build it with their memberships, and so now we have the resources to be able to pay him to do all that tons and tons of work.
And make it better. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So another thing that will be, as we get into this episode is all about milk and dairy and things like that. And I've created a PDF with some of what I talk about, not all, because a lot of these are not my recipes. So I'm just linking you directly to the creators of these recipes. But some of them I've been able to put into a PDF for you, and you can download that in the show notes. And I've also dropped all the links to the recipes in that PDF, so you can find everything that I talk about here in one place and tuck it into your cooking notebook or whatever, if you like. And so that PDF, as a supporter, Allison, tell me, you would go to the website and there's the download section.
There's a download section. Yeah. Go to the download
and then when you click on it, it'll say you need to log in.
Yes, correct.
Some of them we have available for everybody at the top, but then if you click the supporter download ones, then you'll log in. Okay, great. Allison, also I wanted to say, I actually thought about this in January and I put it in my calendar for today because I was like, I will forget between now and then. But Mother's Day in the US is coming up. And so I wanted to tell everyone, if you want to, Allison's courses, you could hint to your family. And by hint, I mean send them the link and tell them, excuse me, I want this chocolate episode, or you all want rye bread, get me the rye course. You could send them that, or Allison, at my request, Rob set up a gift card option. And another option would be if you really want our cookbook or the cookbook and the spelt cookbook, you could ask your family to get you those for Mother's Day.
So we have gift cards for the cookbooks.
Get your mother
on Ancestral Kitchen Podcast. So someone can do it kind of as a surprise. I also have gift cards, like you said, for the Bose course on my website. And then if you're buying one of my courses that's on the fermentation school, that's the rye course and the Suans course. And then
or your sourdough starter course, honestly, which there's a code to get it for free. So just get that one for free.
You can get that one for free, exactly. Then also, if you're buying one that you have to pay for, there's a tick box on the checkout which says this is a gift. And the same thing happens. You'll get it kind of surprise sent to someone. So,
Awesome.
So good.
I've got the link to that, the shop in the show notes. And I put your shop and the podcast shop, but if you guys buy from either one, it all goes to the same place, so it doesn't matter.
Yes, exactly.
And then I will put I want to put that sourdough starter course in there with the code so that if anyone wants to just get it for free, you can get it for free. It's only $5, but
yeah, excellent.
And then you guys already heard me announce to you a little bit ago about the liver giveaway, which is so cool. I think it's our first. We've never done a liver giveaway, have we?
No.
Okay. So can we call it organ donation? So there's a liver giveaway, which is completely and entirely sponsored by our amazing podcast sponsor, Fassel, over at One Earth Health. So we're very thankful to him for putting together this awesome promotion. So check the show notes for the links to that. You'll get his newsletter and our newsletter, and you will also be entered to win 3 bottles, I think it is.
Yeah, 3 months.
3 bottles. Yes, which I am taking those religiously every day right now. I need them. So
and how
I'm
do
a
you,
number
I mean,
one fan.
You can't tell what you'd feel like without them, but how do you feel?
That's true. But here's the thing. I got 4 hours of sleep last night, and that's par for the course right now. I need all the help I can get. And I am that rat swimming in the barrel from the study, Allison. I am the rat swimming in the barrel that needs the energy from the liver. And if you guys don't know what we're talking about, there was a study where some studiers, scientists, put these rats in a barrel, and the rats that didn't have the liver tapped out very quickly. And I'm abbreviating the study very shortly. This is not a scientific summary. And then the rats that had liver kept swimming for so many hours that the researchers just had to take them out of the barrel because they didn't have time to keep standing there and waiting for the rats to get tired. So liver has what's called like an unknown factor for energy. Nobody knows exactly what it is, but it gives you more energy, which is why it's so popular with bodybuilders and, in my case, mothers with children that think midnight is a delightful time to get up and play. So, I'm swimming around. Okay,
going into the contest. I should say, the contest is only for US residents. I have to say that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so sorry. I forgot. Yeah.
Let's talk about the episode.
I completely forgot that.
Because we have some very exciting things to talk about with milk today. Yeah. So tell us who this episode's for, Andrea.
Okay, perfect. I'll do that. I'll give a brief intro, and then why don't we take a break for a minute, and then we'll get right into the content. Okay, so this episode is for anyone who wants to know how to make some very useful and staple home dairy products. These are not necessarily considered advanced, like an aged rinded cheese or something like that, but these are absolute staples of a home dairy. And even if you were making advanced products, you'd probably still be making these as a baseline all the time because your family will be asking for them, and they're just part of everyday life for a lot of people. The recipes that I chose are also related to who this is for. So I am making the assumption that probably the most of you don't own a cow. I know some of you listening do own cows. Jess, I'm looking at you, and I am waiting every day for a text that your cow has had her calf. But some of you own cows, but I'm assuming you don't all own cows. And so I chose dairy items that were not only at the peak of what we use a lot of, but also very economical in terms of milk used. So the amount of milk that you put into this product is either totally or very close to how much finished product you'll get out. And then everything involves the tools and ingredients you would either already have, because if you don't have a cow, you probably haven't invested in like a cheese press or something, although you may have. And then there also will be some things that you can typically get a hold of very easily, but no really expensive gadgets. But of course, I know a lot of you may end up owning cows very soon, so that's fine. I will also put in a few ideas, Allison, for how to use some of the different types of whey that are produced in these products. So even when there is, a little leftover material, it's like
so
when
many people ask about that. I know so many people have asked about that. I've seen them.
Yes.
So this is really useful.
Yeah. There's no waste needed when you make anything dairy. There just isn't. And all the recipes I'm about to share can be made with low heat or vat pasteurized milk as well as with raw milk. I have exclusively used raw milk for all of this, so I really will give my personal experience to that. But all these recipes can be done with a low heat pasteurized milk.
Great.
Okay, let's take a quick break and then I'll get into the subject.
If you're into ancestral eating, you'll know that liver is a superfood, full of vitamin A, K, and a whole host of B vitamins, plus many essential minerals. It has an exceptional nutrient profile and is a staple of traditional healthy diets. But it's not always easy to consistently get liver into our lives. Finding a good supply, cooking it so it actually tastes good, and getting all of our family to eat it. These things can be hard, especially when we're busy or travelling. That's where Andrea and I turn to liver capsules. They give us all the benefits of liver without having to worry about the sourcing, the preparation, or the eating. One Earth Health produces organ capsules from 100% grass-fed New Zealand-raised cattle. As a podcast listener, you can get 15% off your first order and 5% off subsequent orders by using the link in our show notes. And each time you order, you'll also be supporting us to continue making this podcast.
So, Alison, we have been enjoying our raw dairy for, I think this month will mark 14 years from when I switched from low heat pasteurized to raw. And then we're using the low heat pasteurized before that, maybe for 2 or 3 years. So we've owned a cow the last few years, but I sold her, and we only had her out here for 1 year, but I sold her when I was pregnant with the baby. And how long have you guys been drinking raw milk?
Oh, a long time. Since the very early days. I think it was one of the first things that we did when I found Nourishing Traditions, which I think we've talked about before. For us was 2010, I think. We were in Italy and I found some raw goat's milk via a buying group and started making kefir with it straight away. We've lived in lots of different places and we've had sometimes easier, sometimes less easy access to raw milk. And it's been more difficult without a car because we can't just go and pick up a bunch of raw milk. Although Rob can carry a lot, we can't cart so much milk back. So sometimes we've had it, sometimes we've not been able to access it. Here, since coming back to England, I haven't been able to source it here yet. I know it's here, but it's being sold over the farm gate and I can't get to the farm gate. So we haven't got it here yet, but I'm hoping we will do soon.
Great. Can Gabe have the milk?
Yeah, but we don't really eat milk ever straight. So we always have it fermented into something. So although he couldn't at the very beginning, he is now having goat's milk that's been fermented into kefir mostly. But he seems okay on it. I'm not 110% sure. I'm kind of still tracking him. But I feel much happier that the milk that we're giving him is goat because he's kind of had less problems with that. And I also feel really happy that we're doing something with it, like you're going to talk about today. We're processing it and we're using fermentation to change its structure. So it's kind of accepted differently by his body.
Great. In the US, you can check realmilk.com, which I will link in the show notes. And you can also ask if you have a local Weston A. Price Foundation chapter, and you just look for that on their website. That's in the links also. And you can also find milk sometimes through eatwild.com, which I think is where I found our cow share when we lived in Virginia. And I will recommend listening to episode 53 if you haven't already. That is a Raw Milk, Our Ancestral Heritage episode.
That is one of our most downloaded episodes. It's such a good episode, Andrea, that you put together.
Great.
Yeah,
well, that's in the show notes also. So you can listen to that if you want to learn more about why we would even consider drinking raw milk and what that really means. So the accessibility and price of milk varies from place to place, which is also another reason why I wanted to circumspectly put together these recipes that were fairly foolproof so that you weren't inadvertently, shall we say, wasting product with something that maybe wouldn't turn out to be what you were going for. Allison, the accessibility for milk in the US is getting better every day. How is accessibility in the UK?
It's not bad. It's not really, like the States where it's per state, per region. There are some producers online and you can get it shipped across the country if you want. I've talked to quite a few patrons about this, and they sometimes don't actually love doing it that way because it's not supporting a local farm. And also in the shipping, there's usually lots of plastic packaging. So it's really hard to ship things in glass. So they kind of trying to weigh up, well, do we want to support a local farm? Is there a way that I can find this locally so it doesn't involve all this plastic? Some producers, as I said, will sell it over the farm gate, but not at a market. So, I mean, it's kind of reasonable. If you want to get some, you can definitely get some. But if you want to get it locally, it's a bit more difficult. It depends on kind of a network and who you've got around you.
Okay. Well, that's good. And the more people listen to our podcast, the more accessibility will grow because more people will be able to, there are farmers who would love to be selling raw milk, but there's not the market for it where they are. So as the market emerges, the supplier also emerges and they kind of have to grow hand in hand. So shipping your milk across the country in the plastic maybe isn't the most ideal. But it could just be a stopgap measure that shows those farmers, hey, look, it's really popular. This is a market I should get into. So it is getting better, I think, in many places. So that's good news. All right, Allison, I'm also going to define some of these dairy products as we go. So you have probably noticed this if you've read The Art of Fermentation and some of these other books that talk about different ferments, that across many cultures, you will find many similar products with different names. So this applies to a lot of things like fermented fish sauce. I know we've talked about that. Many different cultures, coastal cultures, have their version of that. Flatbreads. Everywhere you go in the world, you can find a flatbread with a different name. And they aren't all quite the same. They have their nuances and their differences, even when they share the same name. So, farmer's cheese and cream cheese, for instance, are virtually the same thing and often even defined the same, but it depends on which definition or recipe you are using. The idea we have that farmer's cheese looks like this and cottage cheese looks like that and sour cream is like this is an idea that came from the industrialization and homogenization of food. So when like in our country, pretty much all of our food is controlled by 3 big companies. And so, you could go into a differently named grocery store in any one of the 50 states and find the exact same product from the exact same factory that you could anywhere else you lived. And that isn't true for every single product, but for a lot of products, that's true. And so if you get butter, it's going to look like this standard. If you get cottage cheese, it's going to look like this standard. And with true regional and cultural dairy, it's going to be a little bit different. A lot of people start their dairy journey with trying to replicate the store products identically. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But over time, you will find that you may actually evolve and say, our family actually prefers it this way. Or what's easier for me with having 7 children and not the time to do that little thing is to make it this way. Or I don't have that piece of equipment, so I do it like this. So you will find that some things may change over time and you might not actually want it to be the exact same as the grocery store version you grew up with. So just be open to those nuances in dairy as we go. I'm going to drop a couple dairy resources here also, which are in the show notes and also in the PDF that you can download that accompanies this episode for supporters if you like. cheesefromscratch.com, I think it is. This is Robin. She has a wonderful Instagram account, also Cheese from Scratch, and her website, Cheese from Scratch. And she puts out a yearly ebook, which I believe goes out in August every year, that you can buy called the Christmas Cheese Board book, and she has a timeline for you to follow beginning in August, where you will, if you just follow her schedule, then by Christmas you'll have a full cheese board with your homemade different cheeses. Isn't that such a clever idea?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, you got to start some stuff early. I suppose we might end up with a calendar like that one day with your gingerbread and things on it, you know.
Gotta start them early. Really nice. Yeah, Christmas pudding, mince pie, all that stuff. Yeah.
So I talked to Robin on episode 68, which is called Naturally Fermented Dairy in the Home with Robin Jackson. And I'm not going to go into detail in this episode talking about clabber because she did a really good job discussing it in that episode way more thoroughly than I could do it here. But clabber is an important element of dairy to learn about, and you can hear her wax eloquent on it on that episode. Also, I will recommend David Asher, another Canadian. Yeah. He has a website, milklab.ca, and he was Robin's mentor, so you will see shades of his influence throughout her work, and she does mention him from time to time, and I think she also referred to him during our episode recording. So he has a website. He has a number of books. The book I have of his that is sitting right here next to me is called The Art of Natural Cheesemaking. And as the name implies, he focuses on you using natural cultures instead of Allison. He is opposed to the little packets of culture, as I know you are also.
And after my own heart.
Yes, for many reasons, but not the least of those being flavors and variety. And he has recipes like junket pudding, which is an old-fashioned pudding concept. He has a recipe that I love the name of called You Can't Do That with Pasteurized Milk Cheese. And he has more complex cheeses like blue cheese and rinded cheeses in here. So if you want to give yourself a solid education on all things natural cheese making, you could just read this book. And for all my homeschool and Charlotte Mason moms listening, it is an absolutely living book, and it is from stem to stern packed with the most stunning full picture photos you have ever seen, and somebody who just passionately tells you what he loves about this and why it matters so much. So if you want a book for your kids to read and narrate to you, they could read this one. Another book that I have sitting here, which is the first dairy book I ever bought. So I will say it's the one I've used the most and the longest, but is much more simple, doesn't have pictures, just has very short, simple recipes, but taught me a lot of basic principles, is The Home Creamery by Kathy Farrell Kingsley. And especially if you feel like you get overwhelmed by dairy things, this would be a great book because she just is very clear, very clean, and I have had only successes from this book, so that's a great one as well. And the last one I will say is Milk Cow Kitchen by the appropriately named Mary Jane Butters. And this book is more so aimed at somebody who wants to own a cow or does own a cow.
I remember you saying about it before now. Yeah.
Yes, I found it enormously helpful when I was preparing to bring our cow home, because she has a lot about, cleaning and milking and things like that. And her story, Allison, her personal story is so interesting. I've actually thought of you sending it to you before for you to read. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to link it in the show notes. So Allison, if you visit our own show notes, you can find that link.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you would find much resonance with her story and her mission. So
wonderful. Those books, are they in our bookstore that we have for the podcast?
Yes, I'm pretty sure they are all linked in the bookstore. I will confirm, but I feel fairly certain that I put them all in there, either when I was writing the show notes or when I did the, I'm looking now and I see bookshop links for everything. So, yep, they'll all be in the
wonderful. So if you purchase them via our bookstore, and we'll be supporting local bookshops, even though you're shopping online, and you'll also be supporting the podcast a little bit as well. So.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just talked a lot. I'm about to talk a lot again, so I'm going to take a break, have some tea, and then let's go into easy ferments after that.
Great.
Hey, you washing the dishes. Been there. You've heard Allison and I talk over and over about her love of rye sourdough bread. Well, I might actually call it an obsession, but that's neither here nor there. Now you can make Allison's rye sourdough in your own kitchen with her as your teacher. And she's a really good teacher. Rye is economical, it's delicious, and full of nutrients and low in gluten. There's a reason why it has been a darling of bread bakers for centuries. Make it into sourdough, as Allison will show you in her course, Rye Sourdough Bread, Mastering the Basics. And you've got an amazing, tasty, and nutritious staple in your kitchen. It's traditional and it's nutritional. In this course, you'll learn everything there is to know about how she creates and maintains her rye sourdough starter, all about whole grain sourdough rye, including the key differences between baking with rye and wheat, how to make 2 loaves, an everyday rye sandwich bread, and a delicious Russian-style dark rye loaf, and what to do with your sourdough discard, including video walkthroughs for sourdough pancakes and a tasty, sweet, spiced cake. Head to www.ancestralkitchen.com/rye. All right, some easy ferments. So I brought in some ferments that I think are very core to the home dairy experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the first, and I think the one that I get asked about the most, is sour cream. So sour cream is exactly what the name implies. It is milk that has soured, or cream that has soured, I should say. The first time I made sour cream was inadvertent. I had left a full half gallon with the cream on top, tightly sealed in the refrigerator in Virginia, and flew to Washington and visited my family for unspecified amount of time. And when I came back, I opened the fridge and said, oh my, there was milk in here the whole time. I took it out and I opened it, and I was fairly new to raw milk, and I thought, oh no, this is just wasted now. And I opened it, and the cream on top was the best sour cream I have ever had. It was so good.
Do you think, though, that that's because that was raw milk? Do you think you can also do that with pasteurized milk?
I don't know if that would work with pasteurized milk, because I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it would. My inclination would be to say no, because in pasteurizing, you are killing the bacteria that did the sour work. Yeah. So that's one way to do it, but it does take, 4.5 weeks or 5 weeks or however long I was on that trip. So there's another way. You can add a culture to a sour cream, and the culture can be clabber, which is, in brief, you would take clean, fresh milk, put it in a jar, put a cap on the jar, put it on the counter, and leave it there and shake it every once in a while when you go by for a couple days, or until it is a nice, sour, thick yogurt texture. That is clabber, and clabber is essentially sourdough starter, but for milk. So you can feed it just like you would feed, so you could pull out most of the clabber, add in fresh, clean milk. This is a bit easier to maintain when you have a cow and you have fresh milk walking in your door twice a day every day, or once a day every day, depending on your cow.
And again, a clabber really only works successfully, and he guarantees works successfully with raw milk, correct?
Correct. I cannot imagine it working with pasteurized milk of any type. So clabber is the most native, organic, and natural way to culture many things. If you don't have clabber yet, and if that is a barrier, I don't think you should stay out of the dairy game simply because of that reason. I think it is perfectly reasonable for you to at least start exploring things with, I'm going to say it, Allison, packets and isolated bacteria, because you will get very comfortable working with it. And it's kind of like starting with a yeast bread very quickly you start to say, ooh, I want to explore some more flavors. So I personally think it's okay to begin there because I know where the evolution takes us. And I am a big acceptor of small beginnings. And part of that is because I also know when I say, well, I'm not going to make sour cream until I can make it in a hand-turned wooden bowl with a linen dress on.
Never going to do it.
It's never going to happen. And then guess what? I'll be in the grocery store buying sour cream. So because we all know there is just no existence for me without sour cream. So you have to start somewhere.
I think it's different than if you're making sourdough bread because, with the clabber culture, you have to have raw milk. So if you just can't access raw milk, then, you don't have that option available. And in that case, then you can step in with some really good quality milk and make something at home for cheaper and, supporting potentially a local dairy rather than going to a supermarket.
Yes.
So I'm all for that too.
That's another great point, Alison, that a lot of people look for dairies to produce value-added products for them, but that's a very high barrier for legal reasons for a lot of dairies. Okay. So you may very easily and even sometimes economically be able to get access to good raw milk in your area, but that doesn't necessarily mean that farmer is able to sell value-added products. Some cases, they may not even be allowed to separate the cream. So being able to do it at home then becomes a bit of a more pressing demand in that case. Yeah. So that's part of why I wanted to cover staples today, because I know that's the case for a lot of people in America, especially as raw milk dairies are slowly coming back into our American agrarian landscape. So sour cream can also be made with buttermilk. You can you can put you can put cream in a jar and add a tablespoon or two of cultured buttermilk, which you can use a that's not the right word, pasteurized, like a low temp pasteurized milk to make a buttermilk culture by buying a buttermilk culture and culturing some of that milk. You don't have to make butter to make buttermilk, by the way. It's a story for another day, but buttermilk means multiple things. It doesn't always mean the way after you make butter. But you can take just a low temp pasteurized milk, add what's called a buttermilk culture, and it will get that sour, tangy tartness, which is actually basically just clabber, except you made it in the controlled environment by reintroducing the bacteria to the milk. You could also do this with raw milk if I think a lot of people that I know who are buying raw milk are paying $20 and up for a gallon, or even in one case I know $22 for a half gallon. And the thought of putting it on the counter and possibly it not clabbering right could be nail biting for them. And you can give yourself some assurance with the culture, and then, when you feel more comfortable, go for it and try other versions. But if you make yourself that cultured buttermilk, you can keep it in the refrigerator and you can bring it out and feed it every couple days some more milk and put it on the counter just like you would a kefir. So you can then take a few tablespoons of that and add it to some cream and ferment the cream on the counter and get a sour cream. You could also use kefir to make a sour cream, which I have done, and I know Katie in our Discord also loves doing, and she said, which I thought was brilliant, she said that you could serve it poured over berries for dessert in the summer. And I am going to be doing that this summer because ever since she said that, I've thought about it.
You said a couple of spoons of a culture. To how much cream?
Let's see. I would probably do like a pint of cream with... Actually, I'm going to look in Kathy's book and see what she says so I can tell you more exactly what she says. But I would do a pint of cream with a couple tablespoons. Let's see. She does 1 cup of heavy cream. No, that's not the one I did. Okay, she does 2 cups of cream with 2 tablespoons of buttermilk.
Okay.
So we see where my influence came from.
Okay.
She also has another version where she uses cream, half milk, and a half a cup of cultured buttermilk. So that is another option. And then I'm going to present a third, I don't know what number we're on, second option for sour cream, which is that you can ferment your kefir and then let it pour just regular kefir, like made with milk and everything like that, and pour it into butter muslin, maybe 2 layers of butter muslin over a mesh strainer over a bowl, and let the whey drip out overnight. And then the resulting kefir cheese, which we will touch on in a moment again, is the perfect consistency. You can pull it off when it's the right thickness that you like for sour cream. And we often serve that for sour cream because it is so perfect. Okay. And I'll just add that if you like Mexican sour cream, which is something you can buy at most grocery stores in the US, or at least where I live, you can, that is a thinner sour cream. So it's actually closer to a homemade sour cream, and you can pour it. So it's still very thick, but thin enough to pour. And you can approximate that if your sour cream is too thick by whisking in some milk. Okay. All right, Allison, yogurt versus kefir. Which one do I prefer? I prefer kefir. What about you?
Yeah, we don't make yogurt. Made yogurt
Okay.
like maybe a decade ago. I had a yogurt maker. But I just find kefir so much easier. And I know that the range of cultures that develop in kefir using the scobies, the kefir grains, is much broader. So as a probiotic, it's a broader probiotics. We like the flavour of it. We like the strength of it. I like the kind of slight fizziness. So we don't make yogurt. We're kefir fans over here, definitely.
Great. I prefer the taste of kefir. I think it's one of those things where I just, you start, once you start chasing that sour high, you go for sourer and sourer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then yogurt kind of feels bland next to that.
Yeah.
My kids like them both, but I think if they were to if they were to have their druthers, they would probably say they preferred yogurt. Okay. But they kind of get what they get. But I wanted to use these two to illustrate mesophilic versus thermophilic terminology. So, thermophilic, if you are up on your ancient languages, you are recognizing the word thermo for the heat, the temperature in there. So, thermophile, meaning love. So, it's a warm, loving bacteria. Mesophilic, meso being more middle and temperate, is a room temperature loving bacteria. So if you have ever read a recipe or looked at a packet and it says mesophilic culture, then you know it's one that you can let sit on your countertop at room temperature and let it ferment. Kefir is an example of a mesophilic culture. Most, if not all, true yogurt ferments are thermophilic. I don't actually know if they all are, but all the ones I know of are. They are thermophilic, meaning that they have to stay very warm and cozy or they will refuse to do their job. So those are where you refer to a yogurt maker. You can get these things that hold temperature. I do not have a yogurt maker. I have never had a yogurt maker, and yet I have made a lot of yogurt. And the way I do it without using any power, I got this from, I'm pretty sure it was Kate on Venison for Dinner showed a picture of her doing this once. But I just take a regular cooler like you would pack lunch in, and I put my prepared yogurt in there, and then I take a mason jar and I pour in boiling hot water and cap it and tuck it in next to it, close the lid, go to bed, and then when I come out in the morning, my yogurt is done. Yeah. So that is how I create a warm environment for thermophilic loving cultures. Do we have an episode, Allison, where we said how to make kefir? I'm pretty sure we did. I feel like we've done this like 4 times.
Maybe
But I
the
can't remember.
fermented drinks can I make, possibly.
Yeah, possibly.
It's quite a while ago, but it's simple. Buy some grains,
simple.
put it in.
Yeah, why don't you say how you make kefir?
Yeah, so we have some milk kefir grains, which are different to water kefir grains. They generally aren't interchangeable. We could talk about that. But no, buy milk kefir grains if you want to make milk kefir. And get your milk, put it into a jar. We usually do a pint at a time. So make sure your jar's clean. We don't sterilise ours. Put your kefir grains in, stir them around a little bit, put a loose lid on, and then put it to the side. And then depending on your ambient temperature, just check it. And you can stir it around and taste it. If you like it less kefir, you can pull the grains out earlier. If you like it more sour, you can leave it. Sometimes if you leave it long enough, it'll separate, which can be sometimes difficult to get the grains out of the bit at the top if you've got thick milk, if you've got really kind of gold top milk. But again, it's still good to eat that way. And then when you have got it to the taste that you like, get another jar, we do it this way, put a funnel and rest a sieve on the top of it. People say to use plastic, not metal, although if you read Sandor Katz's book, The Art of Fermentation, he says there's no evidence anywhere saying that you shouldn't use metal. But people generally say use plastic. Pour the milk and the kefir grains through the plastic sieve, down through the funnel into the new jar, and then you'll have your lovely milk kefir in the jar, and you'll have your grains, which you can then use again in milk kefir in the sieve.
Great. And it's such a simple process.
Like milk kefir in 1 minute without
it's like
hesitating.
Auctioning up who will take the milk kefir, who will take the kefir. So the simplicity of that and the ease of it is why I used to just make, when it was just me, I would make a pint every day. And in the morning I would strain it out and use the pint for my smoothie and then start the next batch, and it would sit for 24 hours until the next morning again. Mm-hmm. Okay, yogurt is really simple also, and I'll see if I can do it as fast as you did that.
Okay.
You take your milk, you heat it to 185 degrees Fahrenheit. This is so that your proteins unravel and your yogurt actually sets firm the way you want it to. Then you have to let the milk cool back down to about body temperature, so 98 to 110 degrees, and then you add in the bacteria. Just remember, bacteria is like you. It goes really slow when it's cold and it dies when it gets too hot. So you don't want to put it in something too hot, and it doesn't do much if it's too cold. So put in your yogurt culture, whisk it in, and then put it in a clean but not sterilized jar, cap it, and put it in the cooler with a jar of hot water to keep it companion. Close the lid, and then in the morning, pull it out, and your yogurt will be fully set. Did I
Ding.
do it? Okay, so either one of these, kefir or yogurt, you can take and pour into butter muslin over a clean linen towel, or I don't find cheesecloth to work that well because the holes are too big. My stuff just runs right through. But you can pour them into one of those fabrics. I've also just used a clean napkin from the drawer and let it strain overnight. The thick solids will stay in the top and the whey will drip out the bottom, and then you'll have whey that you can use to ferment things, and you'll have a thick either yogurt cheese or kefir cheese on top. I've also, when I ferment my kefir, Allison, I intentionally pour in quite a lot of cream, and I don't stir it while it ferments, and then I just scoop the cream off the top, and I keep it in a separate container from the rest of the milk kefir so that I can use it. Actually,
but don't your grains get stuck in the cream?
Yes, I strain them out. Yeah, okay. they do get stuck in the cream.
We find that
but
hard
I strain them out.
Because they get stuck in the cream, and then if you try and put the cream through a sieve, it doesn't really go through, so you have to end up picking the kefir grains out. Don't you find that?
I have not had a problem with it. I don't know why. I just mash it harder.
Just very destroying a sieve while you're mashing it through.
Is that why my sieve's misshapen? Allison, the first time I taught a kombucha class, I I showed everybody, oh, here's a SCOBY. I passed one around. I don't use it for fermenting after we pass it around, but I'd always tell them, to pass the class, you have to touch the SCOBY. And a lot of people are like, okay. Yeah. But then I show them, look, you can tear it in half like this and divide it between different jars. And then you can, throwing it all over the place, doing things. And then a gentleman came up after one of the classes and told me, I took another class on a kombucha making at this other place, and the lady was taking it out with tongs and like dealing with like sterilizing scissors. And she's like, he was like, you're just throwing it all over the place. He said, I thought it was so delicate. Uses for your kefir cream, Allison, you can churn it and make butter out of it. So you can have kefir butter or yogurt butter, I suppose, if you fermented just the cream. I add it to our baby's milk bottle when I warm him 8 ounces of raw milk, and then I add in a tablespoon of the kefir cream. You could serve it on berries, as Katie suggested. You can eat a spoonful, which is what I do after I make the baby's bottle. I was thinking, Allison, on your spice cake or the gingerbread, it would be really good. Yeah. You can use it to make tvorog, which is the Russian cheese, and that is really good in blinis.
It's really nice on pancakes or a special kind of weekend breakfast. To make some pancakes and kind of spread it over the top and then put whatever else you want on the top of it and then roll it up. That's really good.
Yep. The whey from kefir or yogurt is active. This is different than the whey you will get from making cheese in the next section. So this active probiotic whey you can use to ferment drinks. And we do cover that, Allison, in our episode on drinks, which I'll link in the show notes. But you can just freeze that whey in ice cube trays and then pop those frozen cubes into jars or vacuum sealed bags and use it to make your drinks all summer long. All right. Good. And there's one more recipe, Allison, that I won't go over here, but if you can tell people where to find it.
Sorry. And I remember now, it is the lacto-fermented ice cream in our cookbook. And I have not made it yet, but so many people have made it and have told me how wonderful it is. So if you haven't bought our book yet, the shop link is in the show notes to the podcast website. And do check that out and perhaps make it and dip the fermented oat cookies that are in there as well into it, which will be really nice. Okay, on that note, let's take a quick break and we will come back and talk about some easy homemade cheeses. Do you love oats? Want to try your hand at a traditional Scottish oat fermentation? Suans is just that. It was made in Scotland for centuries and will give you both a creamy, easy to digest porridge and a tangy probiotic drink. My video course, Suans, the Scottish Oat Ferment, over at the Fermentation School, will guide you through everything you need to know to create these two ancestral foods in your own kitchen, no matter what equipment you have. Head to ancestralkitchen.com/Suans, ancestralkitchen.com/Suans, SOWANS, or click the link in the show notes to get a 10% discount automatically applied.
Okay, not to make a cheese pun, but we're in the home stretch now. So, soft cheese, easy cheese. I'm going to bring to the table today a few old-fashioned farmhouse cheeses, plus a surprising way that I found, Allison, to use up weeks-old milk, like the one I referred to finding in the fridge, even milk that is starting to separate into curds and whey. So the ones I chose to share here are what I think of in my head as foolproof cheeses. It's really difficult to mess these up. When you are buying in milk and it's so precious, I think it's a great idea to start with milk recipes that will give you a high yield of product and a low failure risk while you get your cheese feet under you. There is a lot of nuance, touch, smell, taste, be aware that comes with cheese making that I think is good to practice in the early days and is hard to write down in a recipe.
I don't know if I've got any cheese feet. I'm wondering now, looking at my feet, have I got cheese feet? Have I not? Could you talk to the kind of the simplest cheese? Because some people seem to call it kind of farmhouse cheese, some people call it farmer's cheese, and I don't think we really know exactly what that means. Could you help kind of unravel that, please?
Yes. So the farmer's cheese and the farmhouse cheese is the simple. I'm just going to give you my definition. The simple cheeses that you can make in your farm kitchen. And if you're listening to this from your apartment in the city or a house in town, and you're making your sourdough bread, or you're growing herbs in the windowsill, or you've bought the art of fermentation, I'm including your kitchen in my description of a farmhouse kitchen. A farm kitchen in this context is a productive kitchen, which you can have anywhere in the world. So these are cheeses you can make without a lot of specialized equipment, often without special cultures, and without 5 gallons of milk per batch, because there are some cheeses I have made where you start with 5 gallons. Wow. And that's a commitment for someone without a cow. Someone with a cow says, oh, please give me that recipe. I'm trying to use up 40 gallons this week. So you will expand your kitchen cheese options thousandfolds by adding rennet to your repertoire. This is not necessarily an ingredient that everybody is familiar with. In fact, in the ancestral world, it wasn't an ingredient at all. It was a process, but I'll explain that in a minute. So I keep a little container of rennet in the fridge in the kitchen, and I'll be completely honest, Allison, I have used rennet multiple years past the best by date on the bottle, and I've never had a problem. So I'm not saying I recommend that. I'm just telling you my lived experience. So a note on rennet. What rennet is coagulating enzymes that typically come from the fourth stomach of young ruminants. So this could be lamb, this could be beef, and it can also be made from some plants. It is not like gelatin because this is enzyme activity, not gelatinizing activity. Rennet that is manufactured. So once upon a time, Allison, what you would do is you would put milk in that fourth stomach, but that means you had to have just butchered something, which a lot of us haven't this morning.
I wonder who discovered that first.
There is a myth
into a stomach,
actually, and David Asher talks about this in his book, as it happens. But there's lots of myths in different cultures about where did music come from, where did cheese come from. This is one of those. And the myth is that a young sheep herder girl was taking her milk with her to go, watch her sheep for the day, and she put it in the stomach, as everybody's heard Bible verses about putting wine in wine skins and things like that. Animal stomachs were often used as bags for things. And so she put her milk in the bag. And then when she got around to drinking her milk, it was cheese to her surprise. And lo and behold, the townsfolk liked it.
It was a woman.
Ate cheese henceforth from that day.
Yes.
So rennet that is manufactured can be and often is GMO. And it doesn't have to be labeled as GMO. So if you want to avoid that rennet entirely, David Asher suggests avoid any rennet labeled as 100% pure chymosin, or, and I don't know if I said that right, I've just kind of pretended I knew how to say that, or with the brand name Max, or just generally avoid any rennet that says microbial rennet, which is either genetically modified, or if it isn't itself genetically modified, it's made by companies like DuPont, which make a non-GMO rennet, but they produce genetically modified seeds. And you and I know how we feel about that. That's a problem. We don't want to support that. So I've linked in the show notes, you can actually buy great rennet in a lot of places. It is not a problem to find good rennet, so there's no reason to have to use the bad stuff. And you are getting your precious raw milk. Don't put the GMO rennet in it. So this rennet can be either from plants, which I think, yeah, you can get the plant one. I suppose non-GMO, but I just use animal rennet, which I've linked in the show notes where I buy that. Okay, farmer's cheese or cream cheese. There's 1,000 different variations of this, and almost every recipe you pick up will be different. The recipe that I make follows this approximate pattern. I warm milk, and this is out of the Kathy Farrell Kingsley book. I warm milk, a gallon, in a pot up to 95 degrees. So I'm just warming it back to the temperature that it came from the cow. If you were milking your cow, just have your pot ready in the kitchen and just bring the milk in and start your cheese right away. Then I dissolve rennet, the rennet amount required, which is always specified in the recipes, in a small cup of water. And the reason you do this is because the second rennet touches milk, it starts its enzyme activity. So if you dissolve a tablet in water or dilute liquid rennet in water, then you can basically disperse it across more milk faster the second it touches. So I take the milk off the heat, I pour in the rennet, and I stir gently from the bottom up, and then I just put on a lid and I let it stand until the curds form, which the last 2 times I made it, I just put the lid on and went to bed, and then the next morning I dealt with it. Or sometimes it shapes up in an hour or 2 or 3 hours. Then I have a cheese knife type thing now, but I've used a ruler or like a butter knife to just cut the curd into 1-inch pieces, like you're just cutting down to the bottom of the pot. And then I heat it gently over a low temperature. It takes a long time if you go nice and slow, up to about 120 degrees. And then, and I wanted to give a little side note for all my Tudor monastery farm obsessed friends, of which we are legion. And the episode where Ruth makes the cheese and runs her hands through the milk curds to break them up, and you just need that sensory experience in your life, you can do that instead of cutting it with the cheese knife.
I do that.
In this cheese. Yeah. Oh, it is the most satisfying thing you've ever done. You get to a point where you're like, I should probably stop now. But you break up the curds and then you pour it into a colander lined with butter muslin. And then you let it drain for an hour. And I sometimes just leave it in the strainer. Sometimes I hang it off of the handle of my kitchen cupboard.
So why are you heating it up again after the curds have formed? I'm trying to understand the kind of science behind that. And I
don't know.
It's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I shall look that up.
I know from the behavior standpoint of the curds that it does, like the curds hold together better. Something along those lines. Otherwise it might just be like yogurt almost. Yeah, I mean, it's not really like yogurt, but it might be too yogurty to become a
something
cheese.
For binding. Okay.
Yeah, and it's something that sort of pushes the whey out a little bit. So I don't know though. So then you can put your cheese into, your hand-turned wooden bowl, obviously, and salt it. And you could also mix in herbs if you liked at this point. And then taste it and salt it again, and then salt a little piece and taste that piece, and try to save some for everyone else. Then I like to, you can actually use it just like that, but you can also fold it between the butter muslin and press it with use a cast iron pan, or you could use a true cheese mold if you wanted. I've put it into cans with the top and the bottom cut off, and there's different ways to press it down, but just get it to squeeze out more whey, basically. And that can just sit in the fridge overnight. Okay. And then you can use it the next day. So you can, depending on how pressed you got it, you might be able to slice it. Or you would have you could have a more crumbly cheese if you like. So simple cheese. And
so that can be
easy.
done with pasteurized milk or raw milk.
Yes, you could use I don't know that an ultra heat pasteurized one would work, but a low temp.
Heat. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And if you're somebody who has a really hard time accessing the raw milk, or the raw milk is extremely expensive, read through the recipes. And if you're going to be making yogurt or something, and you're going to heat it to 185 degrees anyways, maybe use your vat pasteurized milk for that. Another interesting recipe I wanted to share with you, Allison, which I thought with your love of not wasting things, you would just find so delightful, is, sorry if I'm not saying the name right, but it's Schmierkäse. And maybe Katie can tell me if I'm saying that right, because I believe it is German. But in this recipe, which I have linked in the show notes, you would take clabber, or in my case, I had 2 gallons of milk that were in the refrigerator. And when some milk was put in by my willing subjects, they did not rotate the milk, and so it got pushed into the back and wasn't pulled forward. And so I found that it was 4 weeks old. And so I decided to use it like clabber, even though it had been refrigerated this whole time and hadn't separated. So I poured it into the pan and warmed it slowly up to about 125-ish Fahrenheit. And because it was so old, as it warmed, it thickened into a yogurt consistency. And from there forward, I made the Schmierkäse cheese, which is, if you've ever seen like queso type cheese that you can pour, it's exactly that. And it's so good. So I heated it, and then I poured it into the butter muslin lined colander, and I let it drain for a couple hours. And then once the curds were fairly dry by that point, then I dumped them back into the pot and I sprinkled a little baking soda on them. And I wish I could tell you exactly what that does, but it's some kind of strange alchemy where the cheese started to look like it was melting almost, the curds. And so I let it sit for about half an hour, and then I added in some butter, some salt, and a little hot water. And then I whisked it over low heat, stirring while everything melted and got smooth. And then it was the most delicious cheese. And I made 2 batches of this, and in one of them I whisked in some diced peppers and some seasonings and made it kind of like a dip. And then the other one I just left plain, and we'll see how.
Wow.
That could be
magic, that one.
It is totally
Baking
magic.
powder, whisking, and
I know.
oatmeal magically creates.
Right. Yeah. You have to say some spells too, but yeah.
Yeah.
So the whey from these cheeses is not going to, I don't know that it would ferment your drinks necessarily. If you used clabber, I guess maybe it would, but I heated them pretty hot, so I don't know. So you can use it to make, here's another word, I don't know if I'm saying it right. And Allison, I went all over the internet and I couldn't find anything but dumb AI robots telling me how to say this. But if we have any Swedish speaking listeners, please tell me if I'm pronouncing it right. Mesmor, a Swedish whey butter. This is delicious. It's so good. So you take your leftover whey from making cheese, and I've found that the whey from the Schmierkäse is much more sour, and it's different. It's not bad. It's different. And then the whey from the farmer's cheese, which was much sweeter and different tasting also. So you put the whey in a pot, and then you simmer it for basically 8 hours while you stir it every time you go by. And it simmers down. I had, almost a gallon of whey in the pot, and it simmered down to be very, very thick-ish. And then I added a cup of cream and then continued simmering and stirring and simmering and stirring and whisking until it got darker and darker golden. And I was basically caramelizing all the sugars in the whey and the cream. Then Allison, I was thinking the whole time, I was like, oh man, Allison would love this so much. The entire almost gallon of liquid filled an 8-ounce jar when I was done. That's how reduced it got. And so this would be perfect to do if you had a wood stove going, because you just gotta simmer it forever.
Yeah.
Yep. But even on the stove in the kitchen, it was so low, it was almost a pilot light. It's a really low heat because you don't want to boil it. Yeah. And then I put it into the container. It is so sweet. You would think that I had sweetened it with sugar. It's insane. Yeah. When I tasted it, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is so good.
And then be great on pancakes. I mean, just wonderful.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. The next day, my sister and brother-in-law came over and they brought a loaf of sourdough bread and we ate it on that and it was so good. It is also used in a whey butter ice cream, which I have never made, but I imagine would taste almost butterscotchy because of the way I know. You could make it. You could use this to make the lacto-fermented ice cream and you wouldn't even have to sweeten it. There's also a recipe in David Asher's book, and I had read about it online before as well. And it's another Swedish recipe called like a mesost, or a whey cheese. So mes must be whey, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. And I've never made that, so I can't tell you how to do that, but I just want you to know that is out there.
Okay.
Quark is another simple farmhouse cheese, which follows almost basically the same pattern. It's another one that you can break up like the Tudor Farm Kitchen, and it's another one that you're going to find a million recipes for, but it's the same simple thing, except you're going to, in this case, you could add, with the farmer's cheese, I added in yogurt, as you'll see in the recipe, but in this one, you could use an actual mesophilic culture if you wanted, but the link is in the show notes for the recipe if you want to browse it.
Okay.
And that is what you use to make cottage cheese. So if you make a farmer's cheese, and you remember how I said you break up the curds and then you simmer them, or not simmer them, but you bring them up to 120 degrees and then you strain them. If you wanted to make cottage cheese, you would break up the curds to the size you wanted-ish. They will shrink as they cook, and then you'll actually heat them longer, as you'll see in the recipe in the show notes. I'm actually just pulling up the recipe right now so I don't tell you. Heat them up to 115 for taking an hour to heat them up to 115 degrees. Okay. And the curds do shrink. And if you like larger curd versus smaller curd, you know what to do. Just keep your hands in that pot longer and break it up more before you start. And you can strain that and salt it or herb it, or you could drizzle on olive oil or, whatever kind of struck your fancy. Mm-hmm. The last cheese I want to say is probably my favorite. Mm-hmm. And this is ricotta cheese, which is Italian for twice cooked. Mm-hmm. And at least that's what I'm told, Allison. But I do not live in Italy like some people. Okay. So ricotta cheese is such a win because you already have everything you need to make it in your house right now. Well, assuming you have milk. You will pour and the show notes have my recipe for this. So you will pour your milk into a large kettle. I mean, I use 1 gallon or 2 gallons at a time, so it's kind of large kettle. And then you will warm it up to 185 degrees. And remember, this is important for the protein. So we do want to heat it up to that temperature. And you can add salt at this stage, or you can add the salt later. I've done it either way countless times. Once it is 185 degrees, you will turn off the heat. And then I like to use a combination of vinegar and lemon juice. You could use either one. I just like the combination because I feel like then neither flavor really stands out too much and just the milk itself can shine through. But you will take this acid and you'll pour it in and stir for just a few seconds to incorporate it. You're kind of using it like the rennet. And then let the pot sit with that acid in the warm milk, and the curds will begin to separate from the whey. If they don't separate, just add a little bit more of the acid and let it sit another few minutes and just watch it. Then you're going to pour this into your colander, again lined with your butter muslin, and let it strain for a few minutes or until it's the dryness that you like. I like my ricotta to stay pretty wet, but it's kind of personal preference for each person. And then you're done. You can just put it into your containers or stand there and eat it, because hot ricotta is so good.
Yeah. And it's so good fresh.
And
I mean, it's one of those cheeses
it's
learned from being in Italy.
unbelievable.
There's just such a difference between eating ricotta that's just been made and ricotta that's been made a while ago or packaged in a supermarket. It's like a different food.
Oh, it's not the same thing. My goodness, Allison, when I was a kid, I thought I hated ricotta cheese. I will say the first time I made ricotta, I don't think I've ever bought it ever since. And that was 13 years ago. It's really hard to go back to anything from the store once you've had a homemade ricotta. The whey from ricotta cheese has the vinegar and the lemon in it, so it isn't really much use for fermenting drinks. And I actually did try to simmer it down into the mesmore once. Nah, don't do it. But you can use it to make something called grandmother bread, which I have not done, but I linked the recipe in the show notes. It's basically a bread. It's kind of like a false sourdough in a way. The recipe that I linked has yeast in it, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't make it with sourdough starter, which is what I pretty much do to every recipe. I just put sourdough in it instead and let it sit in my fridge overnight and then bake it the next day. I have, up until this point, pretty much always fed the ricotta whey to my chickens because it does have a decent amount of protein in it, and it's warm when it goes up to them. So in the wintertime, it's a great little snack for them.
Yeah.
So, Allison, when you get to that garden fence, do you envision yourself making any of these cheeses? And if so, or any of these things, which ones would you want to make?
I would like to have another go at ricotta. I've tried making ricotta before, and I try to make it from whey because that is how it is made in Italy, and there are instructions online for how to make ricotta with whey. And I've tried to do it twice now, and both of the times I've tried, it's been not a cheese. There's been tiny bits of curd come up, and then I've been standing there with the thermometer and the stuff, and I'd use citric acid with it not doing anything, and thinking, well, how do the Italians make this lovely cheese out of this whey when nothing happens for me? So I think I'd have a go with whole milk, because that's got to work, because it's got some of the curd stuff in it still. And I should not be put off by my failed whey-only attempts at ricotta. I just get some whole milk and try it that way, I think. Thank you. Yeah,
I think that's a great idea. And I think it's one of those things where the more time you spend around cheese making, the more I realize, like, whey is one of those things. There are very specific types of whey, and whey is a catch-all word, but my goodness, we should probably be more clear about this is whey from Parmesan cheese. This is whey from kefir. They're not the same thing. It's kind of like, saying this is a dog. Well, you mean a German Shepherd or a toy poodle? It's quite different things, and they behave differently. And so I wonder, do you know what type of whey they used for these the ricotta? Because also different types of cows give different yields.
I think, and the recipe that I read originally was sheep milk.
Oh, interesting. I've never worked with sheep milk.
Yeah, because obviously there's lots of sheep milk in Tuscany. So
I have to send you. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, you guys were really spoiled on the pecorino there, weren't you? I couldn't wait to tell you this morning, but I was going to wait till the episode to tell you that yesterday, actually, while I was recording with Megan, the kids came downstairs and told me, there's 3 baby lambs. So our
wow.
sheep had her baby lambs. So technically we have
3.
sheep milk on the
Wow.
property, but we don't get any of it. It's all for the babies.
Yeah, for the little ones. Yeah, well, they take
Yeah.
priority, don't
Yeah.
they?
Well, Alison, this episode was fun. Really fun to research. And,
yeah, thank you. You've informed me of a great deal of things that I didn't know. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and it just makes me think of all the fun that you and I have with being creative in the kitchen, and how this is it does produce our family's meals and the things we need and stuff that you and I feel is so important for our health, but it is a very much creative outlet and a source of satisfaction for both of us in our work, I know. And this is just another fun example of how you can bring something into your home and give yourself both an enjoyable eating experience and some great nutrition, but also the satisfaction of making something and trying something new.
Absolutely. I know that so many people have contacted me, like over the last 3 or 4 months, saying, I want to start dipping my feet into cheese making. This is where I'm going next. I want to start some simple cheeses. And so I think this episode's going to be extremely helpful and encouraging for those who have just been teetering on that edge, trying to do something to give them the kind of the skills they need to go and start flying with it. So thank you.
Oh, it is great fun. Well, Alison, until next time.
Mm-hmm. Bye for now.
Stay cheesy.
I will.
If you'd like to support the podcast, you can join as a patron. Choose from various levels starting at $5. You can see what we offer at ancestralkitchenpodcast.com.
While you're there, check out our favourite books, supplements and kitchenware, or give a one-time donation.
Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.
And if you know someone who would love our show, tell them about us.
You are helping to bring ancestral food wisdom into modern kitchens, changing the world one plate at a time.